Hello everyone, Kristina here. Welcome to another walkthrough video for one of my releases. This is for the August 2025 release. Before we get into this, please ignore my band-aid. That is a crafting related injury in the form of a paper cut. It's right by my thumbnail, so I thought I better cover it up so that it doesn't cause any issues. So let's get into it. Like I've done in my walkthrough videos in the past, I will be sharing with you what every single product in the release looks like and show you some cards that I made using those items. So let's get into it. The Thankful Leaves bundle consists of 3 different products. There's a 6x8 stamp set, some coordinating dies, and then a coordinating layered stencil set. I'm first going to start with the stamp set because that's where I started designing this bundle. And what I wanted was a really large grouping of leaves. All of these leaves are one stamp. It's really big. It's nearly bigger than a background stamp because it spans the entire height of the 6x8 stamp set. So you're going to get a lot of real estate with this one big, huge stamp of leaves. I've then got, let's see, it looks like 5 other sentiments. We've got some kind of scripty ones. This is the same font treatment as the Written Words stamp set, which was a fan favorite. Everyone really loved it. I think of all of my sentiment stamp sets that I've designed over the last year, that is the one that people constantly email me and say they love the fonts and the type treatment of that stamp set. So I thought I would bring it back and I would just include it in with this leaf stamp set. So actually there's 6 sentiments now that I look at it because we have a separate thank you up here and then this thanks down here. So to go along with the stamp set, we also have the dies. Now the dies, you might notice off the bat, you don't have individual dies to cut out each one of these leaves. Unfortunately, it was just too expensive to do that. So instead, I gave you a slightly smaller leaf, 4 different leaves, and they also have some little etching lines on them. So you'll get a little bit of a texture when you die cut these leaves. All the other sentiments have a matching or coordinating die. For the thank you and the thanks, it's just a simple bar like this. And then the other ones are cut rather close to the actual greeting. So the stencils are really super fun because there's a lot of different things you can do with them. So first off, you get 5 6x9 stencils. So there's a few different things you can do with these stencils. You can do the stamps plus the stencils. So stamp the very delicate lines of the leaves and then use the stencils with them. And I've broken up the leaves into different groupings. There's 3 different stencils with different groups of leaves, just so they're more isolated. So if you want to ink blend just one leaf, you would reach for one of these. You can also have it arranged like this, where I've shown it here where the leaves are broken out into the different groupings of the stencils. There's also one stencil that has every single leaf. Do you see that? It's a little bit hard to see. Let me hold it like this. You can stencil every single leaf. You can use this one with the stamps just like that. However, this stencil also includes the stems. So you will get a little bit of color around the end of each one of these stems. I did it this way so that if you wanted to do all of the stamps, or not stamps, but leaves all together in one go, you don't have to use the stamp set. Instead, you can use this one stencil and it includes all of the stems. And then if you want to add the intricate little interior pieces on top, you then have this stencil, which layers right over the top and adds in all of those details. This is really fun to add like a metallic or even an embossing paste or something like that on top. So like it shows on the back of the packaging, you can do stamps plus stencils, stencils only. And this one I did the 3 individual leaf stencils plus the intricate stems on top. And then this one, you can do just the stencils. There's lots of options, and I'm going to show you some cards with all those options right now. This first card used that stencil that had all of the leaves. I did all the ink blending, and then I went over top with just the detail stem stencil, and I did some gold embossing paste. I then used the Thanks from the stamp set and did some gold heat embossing on that one. This next one includes the stamp set and the stencils. So I first stamped in black ink all of those leaves, and then I used the individual leaf stencils and I ink blended each leaf by itself so that I had a little more space around each leaf and I was able to stencil those on a little bit more easily. I then used the greeting from the stamp set as well as the dies. The dots all on top, those are from my splatter texture stencils that came out in July, just last month. This card features just the stamp set. I stamped the leaves in gold embossing powder on some watercolor paper, and then I watercolored all of the leaves using some Concord 9th inks. I used the same colors that I'm using for all of the cards in this release, and it was super fun. I was really excited to get such vibrant color, even when just using the ink pads kind of smushed down onto a slick surface and picking them up for the watercoloring. So I love this one. I think it turned out so cool. And this last card features all of those little die cut leaves. I die cut each of the leaves out of different colors of cardstock and then ink blended onto them just a little bit to add a little bit of interest to each edge of the leaf. So that is the Thankful Leaves bundle. Once again, it is the 6x8 stamp set, the coordinating dies, and the stencils. The Botanic Shade Stencils is a stencil set made of 3 stencils that are measured 6x9. So they're the really large format where you can stencil 2 A2 card fronts all at the same time. So on the back of the packaging, you can see 2 examples of how you can layer up these stencils. And they're really, really fun to work with nice big open areas. So if you love to do ink blending on stencils, this is going to be right up your alley. You can see how big these stencil openings are. I think it gives a lot of opportunity for some different looks. So let's look at some different cards made using the Botanic Shade stencils. First up is this 5x7 card. I paired it with the Woodlines background stamp. I just stamped that after I did all of my ink blending. You can see how cool that looks with the layered look with a little bit of a darker edge on all of the different leaves. I think it gives it such a cool look. This was stenciled on top of pebble cardstock. So you have that kind of grayish tan shade underneath all of the stenciling. Next up, I stenciled with brown, yellow, and green onto some white cardstock. And then after I had the whole design stenciled, then I brought in some ink blending at the bottom in nutmeg, and that just darkened up this area at the bottom so I could put my greeting. Here's a nice soft pink background. I believe I used Plumberry, Briar Rose, and Pebble on top of ballet slipper cardstock. And I just love how this turned out. It's such a nice card. And my 4th example of the Botanic Shade stencil pack is this one right here, where I stenciled on top of lilac cardstock with Plumberry and Eggplant and Briar Rose inks. So that is the Botanic Shade stencil pack. Once again, you get 3 stencils, and it is that large 6x9 size. The Sending Trio bundle consists of the stamps and the coordinating dies. So my idea behind this bundle or this grouping of products is I wanted to give you different options for the word sending. So you've got all 3 options over here, plus you also have them in die form. So you can die cut the stamped greeting, or you could have the individual die cuts as greetings. And then there are some secondary stamps to go with it for all occasions throughout the year. Sending congratulations, sending strength, sending holiday cheer, sending sunshine, sending grit and strength. There's a lot of different options. This bar die over here is to cut out some of those individual little lines. You can also use this larger rectangle for the 2 lined greetings, as well as for the back of this sending one right here. So you can stack them on top of each other. And I have an example of that, and I'll point it out. So let's look at some cards. There's actually a lot of cards from this release using the Sending Trio stamps and dies. First up, we have this Sending Resilience card. This uses the Botanic Shade stencils as the main design element. This one right here also uses that same stencil pack, but this time I stamped the sending and put grit and strength right below. Over here was the dies with matte gold cardstock with a white shadow die. This one right here, I used the scripted die for the sending, and I stacked that up on 4 layers of white cardstock and then stamped the sympathy right below. This card uses that sending, and this is the one where I cut out that full rectangle. Let's see, I'll show you right here. I cut out this rectangle in white, and then I cut out the sending in gold, and I adhered it on top so I can get that kind of layered look. On this card, I used some strips of cardstock to create a colorful kind of piece that I then used the sending die for, and then I stamped the get well wishes down below. And on this card, I used that scripted die and as well as the shadow coordinating die to go with it, and then I stamped the smiles on this other long strip of cardstock. So this is the Sending Trio bundle. It consists of a 4x6 stamp set and coordinating dies. I'm continuing my thin frames dies with the circle thin frames dies. This is a really great set of dies, lots of different sizes for a bunch of different projects. So let's see how these dies can be used. On this first card, I used 3 of those thin frame circle dies. And this one that's right here in the middle, I actually cut that out of some white cardstock as well, and then used it for the ink blending in the background. On this card, I used a larger circle die from my stash to create the actual card base. And then I used the thin frames for all of the circle pieces inside, including cutting out a vellum piece to go over the top. For this one, I used the largest of the thin frames circle dies, and I actually cut out a slightly larger circle die for the background, so this one could be inset from the edge just a little bit. So that is the circle thin frames dies. I think this is pretty versatile because you can use not only the actual frame aspect, but you could also just use it to cut out circles. So there's a lot of different ways you can use the thin frames dies that are circles. The Wood Lines background stamp is one that I've been wanting for a little while. If you stamp it onto something that's more brown in shade of color, it looks like wood, but it could also just look kind of like a really fun crosshatch pattern. So I'm going to show you some examples of how you can use this background stamp. On this first card, I stamped it in pebble ink over the top of some ink blending. And you can see how that pebble ink sort of goes right over the top of those darker shades and really gives it quite a bit of texture. It makes it look almost like a piece of cloth or something like that. On the back of this card, I once again used pebble, and I just had it go right across this 5x7 card. And because it's not long enough to, continue the whole design, I just centered it on the front of the card for, kind of giving a border on the top and bottom. On this card, I actually stamped the Wood Lines background twice. I stamped it one direction, rotated my cardstock, and then stamped it the other direction. So it sort of almost created a cheesecloth sort of texture, or like very open weave linen. I think it looks really, really neat. For this card, I put that in the background, and it sort of gives a wood texture, but along with those leaves, it has some sort of like tropical vibe to it to me. I think it's a really cool idea to do this. And I just did eggplant cardstock with eggplant stamping, and I stamped it about 3 or 4 times until it was nice and dark. For this card, I have just a little bit of this woodline background's texture in the background. I just had it kind of hanging off the bottom edge of this card. So that's the Wood Lines background stamp. The actual usable space is just about 5.5 by 5.5. So you can cover the entire surface of your A2 card, which is what I did here. It covers from edge to edge. The Thick and Thin Thanks dies is kind of a little bit of an interesting different take on a greeting die. I wanted to give you lots of different options on how the word looks. So you can see in this example on the back of the packaging, you have a very thin lined word, and then you have one that's a little bit thicker. But what's interesting about all 4 of these dies is you can nest them all together and stack them up for a lot of different dimension. I've got a card that has 3 of these stacked, and you'll see exactly what I mean. This first card has the thin lined thanks just by itself. I kind of stacked that up 4 times to give it quite a bit of dimension, and it really stands out on top of this colorful kind of border. On this card, I used a little bit of the thinner of the shadow dies with the thinnest of the word dies and paired those up. I also stacked that shadow so it had quite a bit of dimension on it. And here's that example of where I have 3 of those die cuts stacked all together. So I have one of the shadow, I have the thicker of the word, and then the thinnest of the word. You could really see how that stacks up, and you can get a little bit of a different look just by stacking all of those up together. So if you wanted to, you could actually put that thickest shadow die cut on the underneath, and you could have 4 of them stacked all on top of each other. So this is the thick and thin thanks dies. I think it's really fun because it gives you lots of different options, and if you want to have a more colorful greeting, you can use all 4 layers together. The Easy Strips dies is actually just one big huge die, and the length of it is 7 1/4. So it's going to span the entire length of a 5x7 card front, or there's enough length for all of these strips that you can really do some fun things on the front of an A2 card, you know, putting things at a diagonal or whatnot. The thing that's really great about this one big huge die is that if you want to just go through your cardstock stash and die cut a bunch of strips out of one color, you can do it all in one go. So on the back of the packaging, you can see all of the different sizes. I just took a marker and wrote these on here so that I remember the sizes for you. You're going to get 3 strips that are 1/8 of an inch, 3 that are 1/4, 3 that are 3/8 of an inch. Then you're going to get 2 1/2-inch strips and 2 5/8 strips. So this is really great. I love all of these different widths for these strips, and it really lends itself to doing some really fun techniques. So let's look at a few cards that I made using the Easy Strips dies. One of the first cards that I made was this one where I created my own plaid pattern. Now I had to do some creative kind of engineering in my head trying to get this just right. But you can see here it's enough length that I can put these at a diagonal across an A2 card front. And hopefully I'm going to be sharing how I created this card over at my YouTube channel sometime soon, because I did do some creative things to get this looking just right. I had to be patient and it was time consuming, but I really love how it turned out in the end. For this card, I took I think it was the 1/4-inch strips, or maybe even the 3/8, no, I think that's a 1/4. And I created a strip of all of those colors put together and then die cut the sending word out all at once. Just a little tip for you if you want to try something like that. Adhere all of your colorful strips of cardstock to a very thin paper. You need it just thick enough to keep everything together. That will help you get the die cut just right. And on this third card, I took all of these little itty bitty 1/8-inch strips of all of my colors from this release and put them together on one large strip. It gave a nice colorful background to put that white die cut on top. So this is the Easy Strips dies, and I'm going to show you how many strips I have left over after cutting everything out. Look at all of these strips. I'm going to go through and section them out by color, and then I can store them with that particular color of cardstock. I was able to cut out all of these in a short amount of time, and then I can just have them on hand for whenever I want to break them out and start creating. So this is my August 2025 release over at Concord9th.com. I hope you enjoy all of these products. Everything is available now in the Concord 9th shop. Check out links down below, and thanks so much for watching. I'll see you in another video very soon.